Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Dirshu Berurah share. We're holding in Berurah Chelik Hey. We pick up today on the bottom line of Kuf Tes Amud Beis. So we're going to be doing Kuf Yod Amud Aleph. I believe we're still one daf behind in the Dirshu Daf Yomi B'Halacha schedule. Hopefully we'll catch up shortly. We're holding in Siman Tov Tzadik Ches, and we're continuing to discuss the halachas that pertain to shechita on Yom Tov. Of course, shechita is a malacha that generally you're not allowed to do on Yom Tov. However, l'tzarech eichel nefesh, for the purposes of food preparation, if you're going to be eating that food on Yom Tov, you're allowed to do shechita. So, on the bottom line of Kuf Tes Amud Beis, Sif Yud Daled, the Mechaber says, La yishchait adam chaya v'oif b'yom tov. A person is not permitted to shecht a chaya, a wild animal like a deer, va'oif, or a bird, let's say a fowl, chicken, a goose, a duck, b'yom tov, you should not shecht such an animal on Yom Tov, ela im kain yesh lo afar muchan miba'od yom, unless you have dirt already prepared from before Yom Tov. What is this dirt for? So this is for kisuy hadam. We know that there's a halacha when you shecht a chaya, when you shecht a non-domesticated animal, or an oif, you shecht a bird, there is a chiyuv of kisuy hadam. You have to cover the dam, both the blood, both underneath and on top. You have to cover the dam with afar tichuach. You have to cover it with loose dirt. Now, what's the problem? Why do you have to have dirt that's already prepared before Yom Tov? So let's take a look right away in the Mishnah Berurah. It's going to take the Mishnah Berurah a little time until he gets to the explanation of exactly what the problem is. Why do we need to have afar muchan miba'od yom? But he's going to cover a couple of other things first, and then eventually he'll get to it. So let's take a look on the bottom of Kuf Tes Amud Beis. Mishnah Berurah is Katan Samach Tes. Mishnah Berurah says chaya va'oif. You're not allowed to shecht a chaya, a non-domesticated animal, or an oif, a bird, shetzrichin kisuy hadam, because these animals carry with them an obligation, a chiyuv of kisuy hadam. Ois katnayin, afar muchan. You have to have dirt that is already prepared. Says the Chavetz Chaim, v'yihiyah ha'afar tichuach. The afar, the dirt that you're going to use for the kisuy hadam, has to be loose. It has to be thin granules of dirt, loose dirt, that you can use for kisuy hadam. It can't be clumps of earth that you have to crumble up in order to use for kisuy hadam. It has to be dirt that's already fine, that's already loose, that you could sprinkle to use for kisuy hadam. Why? The ketishas regavim, because crushing up and grinding up clumps of earth, hu malacha gemura. That's a malacha da'araisa, du telada to teichen. That's a telda of the malacha of teichen. The malacha of teichen is grinding, let's say grinding wheat kernels into flour. So too, grinding up clumps of dirt is the malacha of teichen. And we learned earlier, and I think in Tov Tzadik Hey, that teichen, grinding, is one of the malachas that are not mutter on Yom Tov, even l'tzarech eichel nefesh. We explained over there one of the reasons we had a machlokes rishonim. Is that true mid'araisa or is it only mid'rabanan? Is the malacha of teichen really mutter mid'araisa on Yom Tov, but it's also mid'rabanan, or is it not even mutter mid'araisa for eichel nefesh? And we said one of the reasons for this is that teichen is, generally speaking, it's not a malacha that you do in a limited amount just for what you need right now. For example, somebody generally does not say, I need to bake a cake, I need to bake challah, so I'm going to grind flour for what I need now. That's not the derech. The derech is you take a lot of wheat kernels, you grind it up into a lot of flour, you prepare 50 pounds of flour, you put it into storage, and then you use the flour as you need it. On Yom Tov, we're only mater malachas that you're doing for now, l'tzarech Yom Tov. And since that's not generally speaking the derech of teichen, teichen is not mutter even for tzarech nefesh on Yom Tov. V'hu adin be'efer shal hasaka shehusak b'ba'od yom. The same is true. The Mechaber is going to discuss soon the question of using ashes. If you have afer with an aleph is ashes from a fire. So you're also allowed to use ash for kisuy hadam. Says the Chavetz Chaim, "V'hu adin be'efer shalasaka shuhusak b'ba'od yom." So too, we're going to discuss ashes that were already burnt into ash from before Yom Tov, the mistama muchan hu l'chol tashmish uchidlakamei b'sif tesvav. So ashes are considered already to be muchan. If you have a fireplace and you have ashes in the fireplace, ash was something that they used quite a bit in the olden days. They used it for all manner of things, ash. So if you have ash that's sitting in the fireplace, and it's not ash that was created on Yom Tov, that's going to have a different problem we'll discuss later. But if you have ash that was already burnt into ash from before Yom Tov, you're allowed to use that for kisuy hadam as well. So again, your two options are, if you want to shech the chaya or an oif on Yom Tov, either you have to have afar, dirt, and it has to be loose dirt that was already prepared from before Yom Tov, so you have dirt that you can use for kisuy hadam, or you have to have ash that was already burnt into ash from before Yom Tov. That's also usable on Yom Tov for kisuy hadam. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, ukishiyesh loy afar muchan, if you do have dirt that was already prepared from before Yom Tov for use for kisuy hadam, oy efer, or you have ashes, yital talenu, then you can take it on Yom Tov, v'yaniach lamata b'mokim sheyishchait, and sprinkle it down on the ground before you shecht. Prepare an area on the ground where you're going to let the dam come from the animal and drip down onto the ground. V'achar shechita, and then right after you do the shechita and the dam falls down onto that afar or efer, yechasenu bam gam lamayla, then you cover the dam on top as well. Tetzarech kisuy b'tichuach lamata ulamayla, because the halacha of kisuy hadam is that you're required to cover the dam with loose dirt, both underneath the dam and on top of the dam. Kamavur b'yaredei siman chav ches sivhet. Vayin sham b'yaredei siv zayin, de mishachat al gabe karka kosher. Let's say you did the shechita, you thought, oh, I have to cover the dam both on top and on bottom with dirt. All right, so I'll shecht my chicken over the ground, over the dirt. You didn't realize that what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to sprinkle down afar tichuach, loose dirt, and then shecht onto that afar tichuach, not onto the hard ground. So it says in Yeridea, de'im shachat al gabe karka kosher, if you did this wrong and you shechted over hard earth, v'yesham dam harbe, and now you have a lot of dam on this hard earth, yital ktsas mimenu, take a little bit of the dam, v'yitanoi ba'afar tichuach, and place it on top of afar tichuach, on loose dirt, v'yichaseu, and cover it. Because your yotze, the mitzvah of kisuy hadam, you're not required to cover all of the dam in order to be yotze the mitzvah of kisuy hadam. You have to cover some dam. So take a little bit of the dam that fell down onto the hard earth, take it, scoop it up, put it down onto afar tichuach, onto loose earth, and then cover it on top of loose earth. Okay, however, im nisyavesh hadam ktsas, if the dam already congealed, asur legaroi b'yom tov, you're not allowed to drag it away from that spot where it fell on the earth on Yom Tov, deshema asur la'ashvuye gumos, because now we have a new Yom Tov problem. Excuse me 1 second. In the middle of share, now you have a new problem. Now you have a new problem. If you're going to try to drag, see if the dam is wet, so then you could stick your finger on it, take a couple of drops of dam, and put it down somewhere where you have afar tichuach. But if the dam is already congealed, it's already dry, and you're going to try to pick it up with your fingers off the ground, now shema asay la'ashvuye gumos. Now you might smooth out the dirt where you're working with your fingers. You'll smooth out the dirt. That's a told of chayrish. That's a shvuye gumos. You're leveling out little holes in the ground. That is a told of the malacha of chayrish, of plowing, to have the malacha da'araisa, which is an iser da'araisa. Okay, now we go to Ois Kat and Ayin Aleph. The Mechaber said if you want to do the shechita, you have to have earth prepared mib'oid yoim. Oh, now we get to what the root of the problem is. Says the Chavetz Chaim, de'im yirtza lachper b'yom tov, if you want to dig into the earth on Yom Tov, kedei lechasais, in order to have dirt to use for kisuy hadam, you want to shecht. You remember, I need earth for kisuy hadam. No problem. You want to take a shovel and you want to take out a scoop of dirt on Yom Tov. Can't do that. Yesh bazeh trei isurei. There are two different isurim involved in this. Echad, one isur is mishum chafiras guma. You're digging a hole, and digging a hole is an isur of chayrish. Ve'echad mishum tilta la'afar dehu mukta. And the other problem is that you're handling this dirt that was not muchan miba'id yom. The dirt, the ground was not muchan from before Yom Tov to be used for kisuy hadam. So it's not muchan, it's not prepared for Yom Tov use. It's mukta. So you have two problems here. You have one problem of digging, which is a problem of chayrish, and then you have another problem of mukta. Uma shekasav. Now, right away now, the mechaber is going to tell us that if you went ahead and you shechted, you didn't have dirt prepared from before Yom Tov, but you went ahead and you shechted. What should you do now? So the halacha is that if you shecht an animal, the meat of the animal is mutter ba'achila. You're allowed to eat that meat even before you do the kisuy hadam. So if you shechted improperly on Yom Tov, I didn't have afar muchan, and I went ahead and I shechted. What do you do now? All right, it's mutter ba'achila, the meat, and you could do the kisuy hadam after Yom Tov. However, the mechaber is going to tell us, if you did the shechita without having afar muchan, but you already had some kind of shovel or spade stuck in the ground, then the mechaber is going to tell us that then you're allowed to scoop out dirt with that shovel, and you're allowed to use it for kisuy hadam. Now the Chavetz Chaim here in Ayin Aleph comments on that, and he says, "Umasha kosa." This that the mechaber is about to say, im yesh loy, that if you have a shovel stuck in the ground and you were already shechted, you could scoop out earth and you could use it. De im ein loy, if you don't have a shovel already stuck in the ground, lo yichaseyu ado erev. So then you don't do kisuy hadam until after Yom Tov. Okay, so we saw over here the two potential problems with digging out dirt for kisuy hadam. One problem is the problem of digging on Yom Tov. You're not allowed to dig a hole on Yom Tov. The other potential problem is a problem of muktzah, that the earth was not muchan. Okay. And therefore, how do we solve these problems? So the way we solve these problems, the best way to solve the problem is make sure you have afar muchan miba'id yom. Dig out a shovel full of dirt on Erev Yom Tov, grind it up so it's nice and loose, have it in a pile. Now you'll use that for your kisuy hadam. No problem of digging. You're not going to dig. And there's no problem of muktzah because you are making it. You prepared it for Yom Tov use before Yom Tov. Now let's continue in the mechaber on the top line, Kuf Yud Amud Aleph. Says the mechaber, Ve'emavar v'shachat. Let's say you did not have afar muchan and you transgressed this halacha and improperly v'shachat. You went then and you did shecht. So now the mechaber says, Im yesh loy deker. If you have a deker, what is a deker? Says the Ramah Perish, Ke'ein yosed shel barzel. It's like an iron peg, shechofrin bayas akarka, that they would use to dig in the ground. This sounds to me kind of like a crowbar. If you ever see workers that are digging holes for fence posts or for the posts for a deck, they don't use right away a shovel or a spade to dig up. They use a crowbar first that has a narrow head, and they use that to chop up and loosen the ground. That's what this deker sounds like. So if you have a deker, im yesh like deker na'utz miba'id yom. If you had this deker already stuck into the ground from before Yom Tov, ba'afar tichuach, into loose earth, then mechaseu bay. Then what you could do is you could pull the deker out of the ground, and you could pull up loose earth with the deker, and you could use that loose earth to do the kisuy hadam. And the Ramah says, "Va'afilo hayatzarach lakama dekiros shari." And the Ramah says this is mutter, even if you have to stick the deker back into the ground and pull up a little more afar tichuach, a little more loose earth. You could do it even many times. Okay, so in a nutshell, what the mechaber, between the mechaber and the Ramah, what we were just told is, you're not supposed to shecht unless you have afar tichuach muchan miba'id yom. You're supposed to have loose earth already prepared from before Yom Tov to use for kisuy hadam. Let's say you did not have loose earth prepared from before Yom Tov, and you went ahead and you shechted. You're not allowed to shecht l'chatchila, but you already went ahead and you already shechted. So then the Mechaber says, if you had this decker stuck into the ground in Ofar Tichuach, if you had a decker stuck into the ground into an area of loose earth, you could now scoop out some loose earth and you could use it for kisuy hadam. And the Ramah tells us that you can even stick the decker back into the loose earth and pull up some more. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah and understand what's at work over here. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut 9 bays. Decker na'utz miba'id yom. If you have a decker stuck into the Ofar Tichuach, stuck into loose earth, already miba'id yom from before Yom Tov. Says the Chavetz Chaim. How does this help? By virtue of the fact that the decker was already stuck into the ground, that means that the earth that you are now going to take out, it's considered as if it was already dug up. And with this, it looks to me like the Mishnah Berurah is trying to take care of the problem. He told us in Ice Cut and Ayin Aleph that there are 2 problems here with digging up the earth. One is echad mishum chafiras guma. You're digging. You're not allowed to dig a hole on Yom Tov. That would be an iser of chayrish. But if the decker is already stuck into the ground, then it's considered as if the hole is already dug. The earth is already dug up if it's stuck into the ground. So that takes care of that problem. Now, what are you going to do with the muktzah problem? So now the Chavetz Chaim says, V'das kama paiskim. It's the opinion of many paiskim. And if you take a look at the Sharatzin, it's cut in Peches, he brings down from Taisus, the Rosh, and the Pri Chadash. V'das kama paiskim. Deba'inon sheyinoitz behedya. You need to have stuck the decker into the ground before Yom Tov, specifically l'shem hachana l'tzarech machar. As an act of hachana, you stuck the decker into the ground as an act of preparation. That's how you were making the dirt from before Yom Tov. So this is how the Mishnah Berurah is telling us the Mechaber is getting away from both problems. As far as the problem of digging a hole on Yom Tov, once the decker is stuck into the ground, so there's already a hole, right? The decker is stuck in the ground. There's a hole wherever the decker is. So the hole is already considered dug. You're not digging a hole on Yom Tov. Now you're going to scoop out the earth and you're going to use the earth. Why isn't there a problem of muktzah? So somehow sticking the decker into the ground is also an act of hachana. And the Mishnah Berurah says, because of that, there are those poskim that say that it's not enough that you just had the decker stuck into the ground. Incidentally, it happened to be that you were digging a hole on Erev Yom Tov, and when you finished, you took your crowbar and you shoved it into the ground. That's not enough to make it muchan. These poskim, the Chavetz Chaim brings down poskim that say that you have to have stuck the decker into the ground as an act of hachana. However, it seems that some poskim don't agree with that. Some poskim say that just the fact that the decker is stuck in the ground, it's already considered that whatever earth you're going to pull out is considered muchan, at least in the context of this kula, where we're allowing you to use this earth b'di'eved once you already did shechita and you have to do kisuy hadam. Ice cut 9 gimel. The Mechaber said that this works if the decker is stuck ba'afar tichuach, in loose earth. The ba'afar kasha, because if the decker is stuck into hard earth, so what does that help us? If the decker is stuck into hard earth, so now whatever you pull up with the decker is going to be clumps. And like we said earlier, you can't do kisuy hadam with clumps. So you're going to have to grind them up. Grinding them up, we said, is another Issa Daraisa. That's the Issa Daraisa of Teichen. And there's no way for us to be matter that. So having a decker stuck into hard earth doesn't accomplish anything. The decker has to be stuck into Ofar Tichuach. Continues the Chavetz Chaim. Even though it would seem that there's a problem if the decker is stuck into Ofar Tichuach as well. Wait a second. You have a decker stuck in the ground. Now you pull out the decker and you pull up loose earth. Well, you're left with the creation of a hole. On that, says the Chavetz Chaim, Ein bazeh Issa Daraisa. The creation of that hole is not an Issa Daraisa. Why? A couple of reasons. First of all, Dehu malacha she'ein tzarich legufa. Why are you making that hole? You're not making the hole because you want to make a hole. On malacha, let's remember that when is malacha asar on Shabbos and on Yom Tov? It has to be malaches machasheves. It has to be malacha that was done for a purpose. And it has to be the typical purpose of that malacha. Over here, the isser of digging a hole on Yom Tov is because you want the hole. Somebody who plows, he plows out the ground, he makes holes to plant in. Over here, you don't want a hole, you need earth. I'm making a hole not because I want a hole, I'm making a hole because I need earth for kisuy hadam. So then it's not a malacha shetzricha legufa, it's a malacha she'ein tzotzarich legufa. That's only an issa d'Rabbanan. When you're doing a malacha for a different purpose, but not the actual purpose of the malacha itself, that's no longer an issa d'oraisa, that's an issa d'Rabbanan. Vegam hu mekalkel. And additionally, this malacha is kilkel. It's not done for a constructive purpose. The creation of the hole, you don't want a hole in your backyard. It happens to be, I need earth. So all right, so I'm taking earth. But the hole, I don't want the hole. I'm ruining the ground by making a hole. So that's another reason why it's a d'Rabbanan. Ve'etiru b'di'evet, and we're matter you to do this b'di'evet, kishashachat, if you already shechted, you weren't supposed to shecht because you didn't have offer tichuach muchan miba'ayim, but if you're already shechted, now we're matter you to take the decker out of the ground, even though you're leaving a hole, mishum mitzvahs kisuy, in order so that you should be able to accomplish the mitzvah of kisuy hadam. So we're going to allow you to transgress this is a d'Rabbanan to be able to be become the mitzvah of kisuy hadam. Mashma me'a paiskim, the Chavetz Chaim says the implication of the paiskim is the chashash guma, that this whole chash, this whole concern that you're making a hole in the ground, that's only a reasonable concern if the case is that where the crowbar is stuck into the ground, there's a very small area of loose earth. Visaviv, and around that, karka kosher. There's firm, hard earth. And therefore, when you remove the offer tichuach, the loose earth from the ground, nishar guma, a hole is going to remain. So in that case, we have room for a concern that you're creating a hole, which we said we're matter it b'di'eved because we want you to be able to be kind of the mitzvah of kisuy hadam. Aval kishahaya offer tichuach harbe saviv. But let's say you're talking about a very sandy area in your backyard. So you have a whole area of loose sand, and you had a decker stuck into it. And now you're going to scoop up sand with that decker. What's going to happen? Are you going to be left with a hole? You're not going to be left with a hole. The area that you scoop the sand out of, the other sand that surrounds it is going to flow into that empty space. In that case, you're not even going to make a hole when you take the sand out. Because immediately upon your removal of that earth, of that sand, nishar afar acher b'mekayla. Other dirt is going to flow into that hole. Nevertheless, so you'll tell me, so if that's true, so maybe I should be allowed to do this even lechatchila on Yom Tov. If I want to shecht on Yom Tov, and I don't have afar muchan miba'id yom, so maybe I could pull the decker out of the sand, even lechatchila, and go ahead and shecht. On that, the Chavetz Chaim says no. Nevertheless, le'inyan lishleit lechatchila, afilu al smach avar kazeh aser. This, you wouldn't be allowed to do this lechatchila. You wouldn't be allowed to shecht lechatchila on Yom Tov, relying on the fact that you have this afar tichuach. Then the itzas decker ein hachana gemur lahitzi b'dei muktzah. Because let's remember, we still have the muktzah problem. And the only act of hachana that you have over here is the fact that you stuck the crowbar into the ground from before Yom Tov. So, but that, the Chavetz Chaim says, is not an act of hachana gemura. That's not really a bona fide act of hachana to consider the dirt, the sand, to be muchan and that it should not be muktzah. To do a real act of hachana on sand, you have to scoop the sand out and remove it from where it was attached to the ground and say, I'm being meichin this sand for Yom Tov use. But just the fact that you stuck a crowbar into the sand, that's not a bona fide act of hachana. And therefore, we're not matter you to use the dirt by virtue of the fact that you had a crowbar stuck in the ground, only in a case of di'eved, where you already did the shechita even though you weren't supposed to. Ice cut 9 dalid. So the Mechaber said, if you have this crowbar stuck in the ground in loose earth, from before Yom Tov, you could use it for your kisuy hadam. Mechaseu bay. Says the Chavetz Chaim, ice cut 9 dalid. The kasva achreinim, the achreinim, right? The ma'afar tichuach haya harbe. If there's a lot of loose sand, so that, like we said before, you're really not making a hole when you take out the sand. If you have a sandbox in your backyard, so you mamish have a loose sand over there that's not going to make a guma at all. He says, he brings down over here, the Achrayim say that in that case, you could use b'di'eved if you shechted, even though you weren't supposed to shecht. 1 second. Then you could use this sand, even if you did not have a decker stuck into it miba'id yain. I think I remember seeing that the reason for that I think what the Achrayim say is that in this case you only have one shvus, you only have one issa d'Rabbanan, because you have no potential problem here of chafira. There's no problem here of digging at all because you're not making a hole. Remember, like we said, you're scooping out the sand. You're not going to be left with a hole. Scoop out sand in the middle of a sandbox. You don't have a hole. So the only potential Issa D'Rabbanan over here is the Issa D'Rabbanan of Muktzah, and we would be matir one shvus. We would be matir Muktzah in order to allow you to be becoming the mitzvah of kisuy hadam. Okay. Ice cut nayin hay. The Ramah said, so if you have this decker, notes miba'od yom and afer tichuach, you have the crowbar stuck into the loose sand already miba'od yom, you're allowed to scoop out earth with it, use it v'kisei adam. And the Ramah said, even if you're tzarich lekama dekiros, even if you're going to have to put the crowbar back into the loose sand and scoop out more, that's also mutter. So it's not only, you don't only get one scoop, says the Ramah. If the crowbar was stuck in the ground, you could scoop out loose earth and then stick it back in and scoop out more loose earth. Explains the Chavetz Chaim, why is this true? Because when you stuck the crowbar into the ground as an act of hachana, that's an act of hachana, not only on the sand that's right in that spot, it's an act of achana. I'm sticking this decker into the afer tichuach, into the sand, so that on Yom Tov, whatever sand I need for kisuy hadam, I should be able to use. That's how you take care of the muktzah problem, lekama dekiros, for many, many crowbar, fulls of sand. There's no muktzah problem, and there's no chafira problem because it's afer tichuach. There are other achreidim that are more machmer, and they hold the achana shehechem me'esmail, that an act of achana that you did from yesterday, from before Yom Tov, loy mahani, is not efficacious. Only for the one single scoopful with the crowbar that you stuck the crowbar in for that purpose. But they disagree with the Ramah, and they say that you cannot stick it back into the ground on Yom Tov to scoop out more. Certainly, according to those paiskim who say that the real problem over here is not muktzah, but just so that it shouldn't look like you're digging on Yom Tov, according to them, certainly you're not allowed to stick the crowbar back into the ground and scoop out more sand on Yom Tov. It mamsh looks like you're digging. Okay, now we go to Sif Tezvav in the Mechaber, 3 lines down. Says the Mechaber, Efer Kira, ashes from an oven or a furnace, Shehusak me Erev Yom Tov, that were already burnt on Erev Yom Tov, Mutter lechasei spay, you're allowed to use those ashes for kisuy hadam. Says the Mishnah cut 9 vav, mutter lechasei spay. Hainu afilu lishreit lechatchila al dazeh. You could even shecht on Yom Tov, relying on the fact that you have ashes in the oven from before Yom Tov, tahavale muchan, because those ashes are considered muchan. There's certainly no problem of digging. We're talking about ashes in an oven. And as far as muktzah, the ashes that are burnt already on Erev Yom Tov in an oven are considered muchan for anything that you need them for. The kevin chaya efer me esmoil, since it was already ash yesterday before Yom Tov, daite ilave l'chol mili sheyitztarech. Your stam das, your default position. You don't have to make a verbal statement to be making the efer before Yom Tov. Ash that's in an oven is automatically considered muchan for any use that you have for it. Continues the mechaber, aval im husak b'Yom Tov, but if the oven was fired up on Yom Tov, so that these ashes were created on Yom Tov, then aser, then you're forbidden to use that ash for kisuy hadam, ela im kein hu cham, unless the ash is hot enough, Sheroi litzlois by beitza, that theoretically, if you put an egg into that ash, the egg would cook. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis kat nayin zayin, aser. If it's ash that was burnt today on Yom Tov, then it's aser. You're not allowed to use that ash now for kisuy hadam. Va'afilu lahamatirin muktzah, and even according to those shitas that we saw earlier in Taf Tzadik Hey, that are makel on muktzah on Yom Tov the same way we're makel on Shabbos. And they hold that there are certain types of muktzah that are mutter on Yom Tov, like let's say apples that you set aside to do business with. You tied up bags of apples that you're intending to sell. So to a certain extent, you will mesiach das from those apples. There would be a svara to say that they're muktzah on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So the shita that's mekel on muktzah on Yom Tov holds that those apples are not muktzah on Yom Tov the same way they're not muktzah on Shabbos. Because the bottom line is, if you have a hankering for an apple, you'll take one of those apples. So you're not completely mesiach das. So it says over here, the Chavetz Chaim, even according to those shitas that are mekel on muktzah on Yom Tov, va'afilu b'noilad, and they're even mekel in cases of things that are muktzah because of noilad, and that's always considered more chamer, mikamakim min noilad gomer kazeh. But in a case of real bona fide noilad, like this case over here, the meikara eitzim, where before Yom Tov, this ash was not ash before Yom Tov. Before Yom Tov, this ash was wood. It was firewood. Vahashta efer, and now it's ash. So it totally changed its physical makeup. Before Yom Tov, this was a log. This ash, you see this ash that's here in the bottom of the fireplace on Yom Tov? But before Yom Tov, it wasn't here. It was a log. Now it's ash. That's complete noilad. It mamish didn't exist before Yom Tov. It existed in a totally different form. Kulei alma moedim da aser b'tiltel. Everybody, even those that are mekilim on muktzah on Yom Tov, would agree that these ashes that were burnt on Yom Tov are totally muktzah. V'em hisik eitzim hayoyim al gabe efer shel esmoil. Now, how about if you have a fireplace that has a lot of ash in it, and you used the fireplace or the oven before Yom Tov, and it was full of ash, and now on Yom Tov, I also burnt a fire on Yom Tov. So now there's a mixture here of ash that was created on Yom Tov and ash that was created before Yom Tov. So there's muktzah ash and not muktzah ash. How do we look at that? So the Chavetz Chaim says, today's muktzah ash got mixed with yesterday's mutter ash. And this happened in a way where today's ash was never completely distinct from yesterday's ash. Typical fireplace, typical oven. The whole bottom of the whole floor is covered in ash. So the ash from today, from Yom Tov's fire, it falls right away onto yesterday's ash. So it was never recognizably distinct from yesterday's ash. In that case, bottle barov. In this case, I just said a mouthful here, I'll explain it. In this case, we say that today's muktzah ashes are bottle in yesterday's mutter ashes. What is this point over here about davar sheyesh lai matirin? We know that there's a halacha of a davar sheyesh lai matirin, something which is aser now, which is going to become mutter later, is not bottle afilu be'elef, because we say, why should we say that it's bottle and let you use it now when it's aser? wait until next week, and next week it'll be mutter, and use it then. So a davar sheyesh lahem hatirin is not batal afilu be'elef. Now, over here by the ashes, you could make an argument that today's muktzah ashes should not be batal in yesterday's mutter ashes, because today's muktzah ashes are going to be mutter after Yom Tov. So it's a davar sheyesh lahem hatirin afilu be'elef lo batal. That's why the Chavetz Chaim says that if the ashes were created and burnt in such a way that they were never distinct from yesterday's ashes, if you had, let's say, one side of the oven was clean and one side of the oven had ashes, and you were burning a fire today on Yom Tov over the clean floor of the oven, so today's ashes are recognizably distinct, and then they got mixed into the other ashes. Well, then we would say that these ashes, today's muktzah ashes, are a davar sheyesh lahem hatirin, and they were distinct. Now you want them to be batal, they're not batal. Afilu be'elef lo batal. But if it's a typical case where today's muktzah ashes fell right into the pile of yesterday's ashes, so that they were never recognizably distinct, then we do not apply the rule of davar sheyesh lahem hatirin afilu be'elef lo batal. Since they were never really distinct on their own, we allow them to be batal. Okay, so what did we say so far here? We said efer kira, if you have ashes in an oven, if it's ashes that were created from before Yom Tov, so that they're not muktzah, you're allowed to use them for kisuy hadam, because they're considered mukhan. But if it's a fire that you burnt today, so these are muktzah ashes, you're not allowed to use. And we said that this is noilud gomor, and therefore even those that are mekel in muktzah on Yom Tov, which is the way we paskin, would still be machmer over here and would say this is noilud gomer, and you're not allowed to use these ashes. And the Chavetz Chaim threw in here the possibility that today's ashes could be batal in yesterday's ashes if they were immediately mixed into yesterday's ashes. But then the Mechaber threw in a caveat. The Mechaber said, if today's ashes are hot to the degree, no pun intended, they're hot to the extent or hot to the degree where you could still use them to roast an egg. So if you had a raw egg, you could put a raw egg into this pile of fresh hot ashes and it would become roasted and it would become a hard egg or a cooked egg. Then you could use that ash for kisuy hadam. Says the Mishnah unless the ashes are hot to the degree that you could use them to cook an egg. Because what's the svara here? How does that take away from the muktzah problem? Oh, very easy how it takes away the muktzah problem. Yesterday, before these ashes were burnt, when these ashes were a piece of wood, when they were a log, it was muchan for Yom Tov use for cooking purposes. Okay, now you burnt it on Yom Tov, and now it was reduced to a pile of ash. If that pile of ash is still hot enough that it could be used to still cook, so then it retains its original status of being muchan. Yes, it's true. Yesterday it was a log and today it's ash, but it was muchan yesterday for cooking purposes, and it is still usable for cooking purposes. So since it was already muchan before Yom Tov for cooking purposes, and it's still usable for that purpose, it retains its status of being muchan. It's still usable for that purpose for which it was originally considered muchan. So since it's still usable and it's still muchan for the purpose of cooking an egg, you could still use it. It's still considered muchan, and you could use it for kisuy hadam as well. Okay, continues the Mechaber, the second line from the bottom. V'im shachat, if you shechted, you weren't supposed to shecht, but you shechted. So we said, even lechatchila, you could shecht and you could rely on your efer kira if your efer kira was burnt from before Yom Tov. Or you could shecht lechatchila and rely on your efer kira that was burnt today if it's still hot enough to use to cook an egg, because it's considered muchan. Now the Mechaber says, b'di'eved, if you shechted, and the only thing you have is efer kira that's not hot enough to cook an egg, but you already shechted, then b'di'eved you could use it, even though it's not hot enough to roast an egg. Says the Mishnah, "Roy cut ayin tes of a b'shen roy the shar rabbanon mukta b'diavad shelo levatam mitzvahs kisuy." Because, like we said previously, when we're dealing with only one iser d'Rabbanan, when we're dealing with only one iser of mukta, which is an iser d'Rabbanan, and that's all we have over here. We're talking about ephod kira, we're talking about ashes, so there's no problem of digging. So we only have the problem of mukta. So b'diavad the chachamim want mater mukta to allow you to be b'kayim the mitzvah of kisuy hadam. We'll stop over here. We'll continue next time with the words of the Ramah Umihu. I'm going to see if I could do yet another share today to bring us back onto the Dirshu schedule. I will keep you posted. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Be well.